Alrighty, welcome everybody back to the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and today we're going to be continuing my series where I'm talking about all 32 teams and what they've done during free agency, the first week, stage, wave, whatever you want to call it. The most important part of free agency is over, so I'm going through division by division, grading each team based upon their additions, their losses, and their retentions. Before we jump into this, keep in mind that when I'm recording these, I'm dealing with a stuffy nose and some allergy symptoms. So if I sound a little bit off, I do apologize, but I'm working my ass off to try to get these done because people said they wanted them broken up into, a division by division breakdown instead of two big videos, one big video, whatever. So we're working. These are going to be my primary uploads over the next couple days. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into it. Kicking off with the Dallas Cowboys, they have done a whole lot of nothing so far. So I'm going to try to keep this one brief. Probably mostly going to talk about the guys that left. So let's go ahead and dive into it. The only third-party addition they have made is Eric Kendricks, who, as a mentor, as somebody that knows Mike Zimmer's defense, that's a solid signing. He's nothing special. He's not going to step up and be a huge part of your defense or anything like that. But he can definitely teach some of those young linebackers what's what and, help them progress. And if nothing else, he's a decent stopgap for a year. We'll have to see how that plays out for him. That's the only addition they made. So in terms of retentions, we've got Rico Dowdle, who they're paying next to nothing. Sure, he's your RB3. He's there. I think he plays a decent role in special teams. I could be wrong there. So sure, why not? Jordan Lewis, keeping him around is actually a pretty solid move. He played in 16 out of 17 games last year, started in 8. And with Trayvon Diggs coming off a torn ACL and Stephon Gilmore leaving, I get wanting to keep him around, trying to keep around as much of your secondary as possible. CJ Goodwin, Trent Sieg, two good special teams move. Sieg alongside Brian Anger and Brandon Aubrey make up a pretty nice trifecta on special teams with your long snapper, kicker, and punter. So I like that move. And then CJ Goodwin, even though he didn't play a whole lot last year because he missed 12 games with injury, he's a solid special teamer. He's a good punt gunner. And if they end up changing the special teams rules like they're looking to, I think he'll be a solid contributor for the Cowboys as well, especially in that case, if nothing else. Looking at losses, I mean, this is a tough offseason for the Cowboys. Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz leaving is tough, really tough, because right now you've got Tyler Smith, who has played awesome at guard. Now he's probably going to kick out the left tackle. I'm sure he can do it. It just always sucks when you have to play a guy out of their natural position. I know he played tackle in college, but he's played guard in the NFL, become acclimated to playing guard, and played it at a really high level. So it always sucks to see when a guy has to move there. And as for Biadasz, they don't have a decent backup center. So hopefully they're able to address their offensive line in the draft, because if not, Dak is going to get killed next year. They also lost Tony Pollard. I don't see that as a huge loss. They can draft a decent running back. I keep saying it. I know this running back class isn't that great, but running backs are a dime a dozen at this point, as we all know. There's a couple decent ones. And Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones. I wouldn't be shocked to see him reach on a back. Go get Blake Corum, the guy who grew up a Cowboys fan. Go get whoever. Go get Braylon Allen, who is a real young, crazy good running back. Like, at this point, I would be okay with Jerry reaching on a running back just because of how bad that room is. Hunter Lipke needs someone to block for, damn it. And then Michael Gallup, it sucks to see him go, but with how injured, or with how he's been since he returned from his big injury, I get cutting him. Defensively, Neville Gallimore, Jonathan Hankins, Dorrance Armstrong, and then also they lost Dante Fowler. A lot of movement on the defensive line. Handful of these guys following your defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, over to Washington. The rest of them spreading about. Kind of sucks because the Cowboys' defensive line is now paper thin, even more so than it was before, especially with Mozzie Smith not quite developing the way you want. So not ideal there. And then at linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch retiring is really tough. Hate to see him retire. I loved him coming out of college, but, I respect the hell out of him for retiring instead of trying to play with a fucked up neck, because the last thing you want to see is a neck injury get worse, right? We've seen what that can do to linebackers, specifically with Ryan Shazier. And then in the secondary, Stephon Gilmore, Jaron Kearse. Nothing to cry over there. You can stomach those two losses for sure. So as a whole, I mean, I've seen a lot of people cop out and be like, I'm giving this an incomplete grade. I'm not doing that. I'm going to give them a letter grade. I'm going to treat the Cowboys just like I treat every other team. And truth be told, this just wasn't a good offseason for them, or hasn't been a good offseason for them so far. Correcting that because they could go out and kill the draft. So, just based off of their free agency moves so far, as of 10:17 p.m. on March 21st, I'm going to give them a D+. I think just adding Eric Kendricks is nothing. So losing all that talent and all you have to show for it is adding Eric Kendricks. And I won't lie, I am knocking their grade a little bit for saying we're all in and then doing nothing. So apart from giving us the only good Skip Bayless tweet ever, I think that's a fair thing to say. Apart from giving us that and adding old washed up Eric Kendricks, they have been incredibly disappointing. And I really hope the draft is big for them because they're going to need it. Moving over to a team that actually participated in free agency, we've got the New York Football Giants, who I would classify this past week and a half as a mixed bag for the Giants. The big move for them obviously being going out and getting Brian Burns. You trade a second-round pick and you swap fifth-round picks with the Carolina Panthers, and you go and pay Brian Burns a 5-year, $150 million contract. That is a lot of money. That is quite a bit of money. Granted, Brian Burns is worth it. I mean, he is an awesome pass rusher. Had a pass rush win rate of 21.6%, which was 9th in the NFL last year. Sure, the production hasn't always been there. He's only had 1 year of over 10 sacks, but if you're evaluating an edge rusher based solely off their sack production, you're doing it wrong because there is so much more that goes into it. You know, there's so much context, etc., etc. I like Burns a lot. I think he's quietly been one of the better edge rushers in the league for a while now. And pairing him with Kayvon Thibodeau is awesome. You got like a really solid tandem there. Thibodeau being a little bit better of a run defender and Burns being doing a better job of shedding blocks and actually getting to the quarterback, right? So you're going to get a lot of examples where Burns is going to chase guys into Thibodeau and vice versa. So when you have two great edge rushers, it's a nightmare for other quarterbacks. That being said, I am a little bit concerned about what's going to happen when it comes time to pay Thibodeau. I don't know what kind of money Thibodeau is going to be demanding by the time it comes time to pay him. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because Burns will still be under contract. Granted, at that point, it'll be a couple years, so you'll be able to start restructuring and doing all the weird cap manipulation and bullshit. And Daniel Jones will be off the books, hopefully. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But speaking of Daniel Jones, they went out and signed a quarterback that I think is better than him, and Drew Lock. Signed him to a 1-year deal. Granted, they're paying him $5 million, which is a pretty penny for a quarterback that's probably just going to be a backup, especially when you have Tommy DeVito, who was, pretty solid last year and can be a backup, and the Giants are in position to take a quarterback this year. The water's a little muddy. But I do like Drew Lock as a player. He will most likely back up Daniel Jones, even though I think he's personally better. I'm just not very high on Daniel Jones. I don't think he provides you a lot as a starter. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I like Lock. I think he's a solid backup. And like I said, I think he's better than Daniel Jones. Then at running back, they go out and they pay Devin Singletary. Gave him a 3-year, $16.5 million deal that's worth up to $19.5 million. That's a lot of money for a running back that's kind of just a guy. Singletary was solid for the Texans last year, don't get me wrong. But that's a lot of money, and I get it. He's got the connection with Dable. He's got the connection with Joe Shane. They all come over from Buffalo. That's a lot of money for this type of running back. Like, for a team that wasn't even willing to negotiate with Saquon this offseason, we're giving Devin Singletary, 2/3 of what Saquon's making? That's crazy. That's crazy to me. I'm not saying they should have paid Saquon. I get not wanting to pay Saquon because he's a running back. Running backs they're hard to justify paying. But I mean, at this point, just go draft one. I know it's not a strong running back class, but make a splash. Go get the kid from Michigan, Blake Corum, or go get a Trey Benson, or go after Braylon Allen, for Christ's sake. Like, there are good running backs in this class. Guys that at the very least have a higher ceiling than Devin Singletary and will be a hell of a lot cheaper. So paying him this kind of money, it's like, I don't know, man. I get it. You want to have a run game. You want to make sure you have a back going into the draft, and maybe they'll still draft one. But at that point, I think signing Singletary is kind of redundant, especially on a 3-year deal. This was like a 1-year deal that was loaded up with incentives and non-guaranteed money. Sure. But a 3-year deal with $16.5 million in guarantees is a lot for a running back of Singletary's caliber. But looking at their other offensive moves, the other two big ones, they go out and they add some offensive line help, bringing in John Runyon on a 3-year deal. That's pretty solid. He is a substantial upgrade over Mark Lewinsky. They've obviously struggled a lot on the offensive line, so I like bringing in Runyon. And then Jermaine Eluemunor, he gets a 2-year deal. He's a lot better than Evan Neal. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle Evan Neal. I'm not sure what the plan is there. I haven't heard a whole lot about it, and I don't know if they have an idea yet. But, you know, Eluemunor isn't fantastic. Being better than Evan Neal, though, is definitely a good sign of things to come. Also, offensively, they they bring in Aaron Stinney and Austin Schlottman on a 1-year and 2-year deal, respectively, to be some offensive line depth. Nothing too crazy there. They also had some tight end depth, bringing in Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll from the Broncos and Eagles, respectively, on 1-year deals. Just bringing in some more tight ends because this is a tough tight end room. You've got those two, and Lawrence Cager, Daniel Bellinger, who I actually do like a decent bit, and Darren Waller, who we don't even know if he's going to play. And when he does play, can we really rely on him? So the tight end room is going to be interesting. Jack Stoll's a really nice blocker, though. He had the 8th best PFF run blocking grade. I have some numbers pulled up alongside me. I don't care about PFF grades a whole lot, but if that matters to you, there you go. Jack Stoll can block. You stole him away from the Eagles, pun intended. So I think those are some solid moves across the offense. You also go out and add Isaiah McKenzie, who has some experience with Brian Dable, obviously. A lot of Bills coming over to New York. And McKenzie, even though he's getting up there in age, he's 28, he's a good return man, and even though he hasn't produced quite consistently as a receiver, Dable likes him. Maybe you can work him into the offense because they are hurting at wide receiver. So we'll have to see how that's addressed. And then you go over to the defensive side of the ball. You've got Benton Whitley, Carter Coughlin, and Darnay Holmes all coming back. Sure. You know, solid depth. Guys that are familiar with your team. Good enough for me. And then Jalen Mills coming over, 1-year deal. He's been around. He can potentially start next to Jason Pinnock or Dane Belton or whoever, because they have had a jumble at safety now with Xavier McKinney leaving. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I'd like to see them draft a safety, just add another name into that mix. And then special teams, Gunnar Ashevsky. I know I have him listed as a wide receiver / punt returner. He's a punt returner. And Casey Creeder, keeping around your special teams guys is certainly important to a certain extent. And then in terms of losses, I mean, the only thing that really stands out to me is losing Saquon and Xavier McKinney. Losing those two was tough. Saquon, again, I get if it wasn't for paying Devin Singletary, because then it's like, why not just splurge, spend a little bit extra cash, keep your guy in-house, right? Unless there's stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm just personally not aware of, and the Giants and Saquon hated each other, which is certainly possible. I know there was some tension there. But I don't like paying Devin Singletary is what I'm trying to get across. And Xavier McKinney losing him to the Packers, that's pretty tough. I get it because he kind of blossomed late in his contract, but I still would have liked to see them make more of an attempt to keep him around. I also think losing A'Shawn Robinson and Jihad Ward is pretty noticeable. I don't think losing either one is going to be like make or break for them, but A'Shawn Robinson's a really solid defensive line player. And Jihad Ward is a really good run defender, so it sucks losing them. But other names I have written down, Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, whatever. They're depth receivers. You'll live. Mark Lewinsky, Matt Pert, I already said they upgraded there. Then Isaiah Simmons and Adoree Jackson kind of cruising off name value in both cases there. So as a whole, this is a very like, what's the right way to put this? This is a very average free agency period. Like, they made a move I really like in bringing in Brian Burns. They upgraded the offensive line, but then they go out and they pay Devin Singletary. They don't add a lot in the wide receiver department. Like, as actual wide receivers and not just more gadget guys. So it's tough for me to love what the Giants are doing. I see the vision, and I'm hoping the draft will make this team a lot better because they're in a good position to potentially draft a quarterback or take one of the top receivers at 6. And it's a deep receiver class, so they can add even more receivers later. But looking at just what they did during free agency, I got to give them a C+. This is fine. You know, C's get degrees, as they say. So I can't be too mad at the Giants. The Devin Singletary contract, that's the only thing keeping it from being in the positive and not just being in the middle. It's that Devin Singletary contract. I really don't like it. And then, like I said, not adding receiver help, letting some of these guys walk. It's kind of tough, but, you know, like I said, future is exciting for the Giants, and I think the draft will be a lot of fun for this team. Moving over to the Philadelphia Eagles, I feel really bad for this fan base right now. And I know that's tough to say because Philadelphia fans usually suck, but Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox retiring in the same offseason has to suck. Like, that's really gotta sting. You know, those two have been pillars of this franchise for as long as I can remember. And not having them around next year, not even as an Eagles fan, just as a fan of the NFL, not hearing about Jason Kelce pancaking somebody every week, or, you know, making a crazy block at the second or third level to set up a big run, that's gonna suck. Like, that's gonna be really weird. And then Fletcher Cox, too. I mean, he's been around forever. He's been awesome. So, shout out to the two of them on incredible careers. But all that being said, Philadelphia actually did pretty well in terms of adding talent. The only big name they went out and got that I'm not a huge fan of is Devin White. $7.5 million for a linebacker that can do nothing but run straight. And by straight, I mean like straight into the backfield. If you ask him to drop back, you're fucked. I don't know how much I like that. I get the idea. You're struggling at linebacker. You don't have a ton of talent there. You need to figure it out. I get that completely. I just don't think Devin White's the answer. I really don't see Devin White as the answer to your prayers in that regard. You know, he's great in theory. 4.4 speed. What does he have? Like 23 career sacks, 40 tackles for a loss. Good Lord, that makes way more sense. That would be edge rusher numbers. But I get the concept, but he's coming off injury. He can't play in coverage. He's just not great. You're going to need a lot of consistency to be pulled out of him. You're really going to need him to be consistent. And for a DC like Vic Fangio, who likes his linebackers, I just think this is a weird move. Like, I'd rather just try Nakobe Dean and a rookie out. See what happens. But, you know, it's a one-year deal. It's not the end of the world long term. But one player they did bring back on a long-term deal, CJ Gardner-Johnson, 3-year deal worth up to $33 million. Awesome. Their secondary has been terrible. It was absolutely awful last year. So going out, bringing back CJ, who, you know, kind of took some of the magic of Philly's secondary when he left, is a great move. He's dealt with some injuries since he left, but he's still a really good nickel corner / safety. Really excited to see how he fits in. You know, only spending a year apart from Philly. The breakup clearly wasn't working out. But the big move they made, the colossal move that they went out and made, was going and signing Saquon Barkley to a 3-year, $37.75 million contract that could be up to $46.75 million with $26 million guaranteed. Holy shit, that's a lot of money for a running back. But if you're going to pay it to a running back, pay it to Saquon. I know injuries have been an issue. Don't care. He's Saquon fucking Barkley. He is one of the few running backs left that is a true game changer. He is an incredible contributor as a runner and out of the backfield as a pass catcher. We've seen Philadelphia do well with some running backs that aren't as good. I'm not going to say are terrible, but just aren't as good. So adding a true dynamic threat like Saquon to your backfield is huge. That offense with Saquon and Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, and obviously Jalen Hurts throwing them all the ball, that is a dynamic offense. It really sucks that we're not going to get to see him run behind Jason Kelce, but I like this move quite a bit for the Eagles, not for the Giants. Hate the Giants. I already talked about the Giants and how much I hate what they're doing. at running back specifically. Not as a whole, but at running back. But for Philly, I really like this move. Another awesome move they made, they bring in Bryce Huff on a massive 3-year contract. How much is that exactly? It's a $51.1 million deal. He will become the highest paid non-quarterback UDFA in NFL history. That's a mouthful, but he's worth it. Bryce Huff has been one of the best pure pass rushers in the league for the last couple years. Last year, he had 10 sacks, 10 TFLs, and 21 quarterback hits. He's not somebody that's going to play a ton of snaps, but when he's on the field, he's going to kick ass. The fact that you get to keep around Josh Sweat is even bigger for that. Hassan Reddick, we'll see. Kind of up in the air what's going on with him. I've seen him involved in trade rumors and kind of go back and forth, back and forth. We'll see. But I will say it kind of makes me sad that they're bringing him in with Nolan Smith on their roster, because I'm a big Nolan Smith believer, but they work with him, they practice with him. Apparently Nolan Smith isn't as good as I thought he was, or thought he was going to be. So I see why you go out and make the move. Then the other big move, I would say, is agreeing to a 1-year deal with Brandon Graham. Sure, he's not quite what he once was. He's going to be 36, but he's a good rotational guy, great for the locker room. And with Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce retiring, you need that veteran leadership. So keeping him around as the last pillar of the Philadelphia Eagles, well, that's not true. You still have Lane Johnson. So the last defensive pillar for the Philadelphia Eagles, if you'll excuse me. I think that's pretty notable. Other signings, Kenny Pickett, you go out and trade for him. Sure, you need a backup for Jalen Hurts. Kenny Pickett is capable of being a backup quarterback. Wide receiver, Paris Campbell, Devontae Parker. Sure, they're going to go out and replace Julio Jones, Quez Watkins, and Olamide Zaccheaus. I think that's about a lateral move, so nothing to complain about there. You also go out and signed Matt Hennessy, who is a guard, signed him for a 1-year deal. He's got some experience, dealt with a knee injury, but hey, we'll see. He can be a solid swing guard. And then special teams, keep around Braden Mann and Rick Lovato, like I was saying for the Giants. Always good to keep your key special teamers around, so keeping your punter and your long snapper around is pretty good. Jumping to the defensive side of the ball, PJ Mustipher, sure, give him a 1-year deal, I believe. Julian Aquara, same deal. Zach Bond, like I said, they need help at linebacker. This is a solid enough move. He's not fantastic, but he's a good rotational linebacker. He's kind of going to be like your Devin White backup. If I had to give him a title, so to speak, he would be the Devin White backup. Sign him to a 1-year deal, see what happens. Same thing with Oren Burks. He's more of a coverage guy coming out of San Francisco, where they breed those linebackers. So good move there too, just getting some more depth at linebacker. I would hate to see this be the end of their moves at linebacker, though. I would like to see them try to draft one. I know this class isn't necessarily known for having great linebackers, but Peyton Wilson in Philadelphia would be pretty cool, I think. That's just my opinion. But moving over to their losses, already talked about Kelce and Cox. The other big names here, Marcus Mariota, he leaves to go to Washington. Who's your backup quarterback? You replace him with Kenny Pickett. Pickett's not as good, but it's good enough. Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift, they're leaving. You replace them with Saquon, you're fine. You'll live. Julio, Quez Watkins, we talked about. Sucks to see Quez Watkins go. If you follow C4, who was a big Madden Eagles YouTuber, so to speak, he's always been a big Quez Watkins fan. So seeing him leave Philly is kind of hurting my inner child from his videos with Quez Watkins. And then also on defense, a couple linebackers leaving: Nick Morrow, Shaq Leonard, Zach Cunningham. You're replacing them with White, Bond, and Burks. I get that. Then Bradley Roby, he's leaving. Sure, didn't do a whole lot for you last year. And Kevin Byard, you traded for him. I still think he's a good player. I'm excited to have him in Chicago. But replacing him with CJ Gardner-Johnson for what the Eagles are going to be doing and the fit and the culture in Philadelphia, I get it. So as a whole, I like what Philly did quite a bit. It sucks to see those veterans leave, and it sucks to see Devin White making that much money. So the Devin White deal is actually going to put a little bit of a damper on their grade for me. I'm going to give them a B+. If Devin White was making less than $5 million, this could be as high as an A. But Devin White is going to knock them down a little bit. B plus is still nothing to scoff at when your best offensive lineman and one of your best defensive linemen retire in the same offseason. So, not terrible. Definitely not terrible. Pretty good offseason from Philly so far. Excited to see what they're going to do in the draft. This is going to be a really interesting spot. I think it would be kind of crazy if they went out and drafted a receiver pretty early on. I think they could absolutely stomach that. They could afford that, figure that out, make it work. But as it stands, I like what they've done so far. And finally, closing out with the Washington Commanders, I would say it's pretty safe to say that the harvest has been bountiful for Adam Peters and co, as they were able to really beef up their roster, add a lot of depth, add some key starters. So let's go ahead, not dilly-dally, we got a lot of names to get through, go ahead and jump into it. Starting out with the name I would say is the biggest and most impactful going into this year, which is Frankie Louvu, the linebacker slash edge rusher coming from Carolina. They gave him a 3-year deal worth up to $36 million. And I'm really excited to see what Dan Quinn's going to do with him. You know, Dan Quinn has experience with a bit of a hybrid linebacker slash edge type player that is actually really capable of playing as an off-ball linebacker in Micah Parsons. And while Frankie Louvu isn't quite as good as Micah Parsons, I do think his skill set can be utilized similarly to how Micah's was used when he was younger, before he made the transition to a full-time edge rusher, full-time defensive end. So I'm really excited to see how that's going to work out in Washington. And then also Jeremy Chin, same vein, you know, super versatile safety, able to play as a safety, a linebacker, a nickel corner, you know, as a high safety, a low safety. He's able to do all of it. And getting him on a 1-year deal worth just over $5 million, a $5.2 million deal, is really exciting. You know, you've got two really versatile chess pieces there on defense for Washington and for Dan Quinn, who likes to keep offenses on their toes as much as possible. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch develop. You know, think Micah Parsons and Jaron Kearse, kind of what you're getting here. A better Jaron Kearse, a slightly worse Micah Parsons type deal. You also got Dorrance Armstrong actually coming over from Dallas. He's on a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million. That's a lot of money for a guy who has started 14 career games, but I'm really excited to see how he's going to develop in Washington now that he's probably going to be a full-time starter. You know, with Montez Sweat and Chase Young both gone, there's not a whole lot of competition at edge outside of a couple of guys they added in the offseason and one guy they retained in the offseason, and none of them are better than Dorrance Armstrong at this point, I would say. So it's going to be exciting to see him kind of grow and develop. I'm sure Dan Quinn has a plan in place for him. I'm sure he's got faith in him if he's, you know, kind of pounding the table to make sure he gets that kind of money to come over here into Washington. So that'll be exciting. Also on defense, just go ahead and knock all the defensive guys out real quick. Dante Fowler Jr., bringing him over from Dallas, another solid depth, rotational defensive end. F.A. Obata, decent rotational depth edge. Clelin Ferrell, also on a 1-year deal, much like Fowler and Obata. He's proven he's capable of starting. You know, a fall far from grace from being a top 5 pick. Maybe not quite that good, but he's definitely a starting caliber player. So him starting opposite Armstrong is pretty solid. Again, not quite Montez Sweat and Chase Young good, but, you know, good enough. He's on a 1-year deal, so we'll have to see how that plays out for him. And then we get up to the linebackers here. Bobby Wagner's an interesting one. I don't think there's a whole lot left in the tank for Bobby Wagner as a player. You know, he's getting a 1-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. He's 34 years old, so that's a lot. However, he's got familiarity with Dan Quinn from when Dan Quinn was there with the Legion of Boom, and, you know, he's a good leader. He can serve as your second linebacker, if nothing else. A good voice in the locker room, good veteran leadership. Can, you know, kind of like Eric Kendricks with Dallas, can help teach some of the younger guys what's going on with Dan Quinn's system, how to play it, things like that. So not a terrible move, just not one I think necessarily helps show a whole lot in terms of actual play. And then the other linebacker they've got here, Anthony Pittman, he's depth. He's a special teamer. So whatever, it's a 1-year deal. We'll see how that plays out for him. The secondary, you bring over Noah Igbenogany as a depth guy coming over from Dallas. James Pierre, kind of the same deal. He's also a solid special teamer. He has played a lot on special teams, so there's another special teamer pick up there. Michael Davis is really interesting because he was really good for the Chargers for a couple years, and then last year completely fell off a cliff, didn't do a whole lot. I'm interested to see what Dan Quinn thinks he can get out of him. He's a really good press corner. And Tom Donatel, who is Washington's secondary coach, actually has familiarity with Michael Davis from 3 seasons with the Chargers. So we'll have to see if they can get something out of him. I think Michael Davis, if you can get him back to playing where he was, is definitely worth taking a flyer on a 1-year deal. And then you also get Jeremy Reeves, who is a really big locker room guy. He's an awesome special teamer, so keeping him around is pretty important. Then on the offensive side of the ball, the big move here is bringing in Tyler Biadasz on a 3-year deal, I do believe. I have it right here. Yeah, 3-year deal in Washington. Get yourself a starting center, 3-year, $30 million contract coming over from Dallas. Obviously has familiarity with Dan Quinn. Really interested to see what's going to happen with Ricky Stromberg. I guess they're going to try him at guard because he was pretty solid for Washington last year. So kicking him over is going to be quite interesting. I'm excited to see how that'll play out. I keep saying that. I know those are filler statements. It's late. Bear with me. But Tyler Biadasz is fun. And then you've got Marcus Mariota, who as of right now is the starting quarterback with Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell on their way out. So that's fun. He can be a good mentor for a young quarterback. I really hope they don't fuck up. They take Drake May at 2. But if they do decide to take Jaden Daniels, I see a lot of similarities in their game. So I can absolutely see a world where Marcus Mariota is a solid mentor for Jaden Daniels for a year. And if nothing else, he's a good bridge quarterback. And then the other offensive additions, you've got Zach Ertz coming in on a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million. Good veteran tight end. The Commanders haven't had a decent tight end in a while. He's your Logan Thomas replacement. You're paying Nick Allegretti a decent amount of money. Got him on a 3-year, $16 million deal. Sure, he's a more than capable guard. You've also got Jamison Crowder coming back on a 1-year deal. Not risking a whole lot there. Austin Eckler, I don't like Austin Eckler. I've been very vocal in saying I think Austin Eckler is an incredibly overrated running back. Has been for a while now, but especially now that he's kind of lost his second gear. He's not super fast as a runner, but he's going to come in and be your Antonio Gibson replacement. And I think you can stomach a 2-year deal that's worth up to $11 million. That's not a whole lot of money for a guy who's been pretty productive. So if nothing else, he's a good scat back. He's a good third down back, and that's what he's going to be next to Brian Robinson. The two complement each other pretty well. And then special teams, we already talked about a lot of those guys, but Brandon McManus coming over, sure. Tyler Ott coming over on a 3-year deal, sure. You've got your special teams figured out. Overall, I think their additions have been pretty good. I like the guys they kept around. And in terms of losses, nobody here I'm too upset by. You know, Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett, replacing them with Marcus Mariota and whoever the second overall pick's going to be. That's a good process. Antonio Gibson, he's better than Eckler. I will say that pretty confidently. He's better than Austin Eckler at this point in their careers, but they're relatively the same player, so it's not a huge letdown. Alex Arma being on the open market is criminal. Washington needs to bring him back. I know he's kind of been on and off their roster the last couple years, but I don't care. Washington needs their fullback. That's your guy. Go bring him back. Save him from the abyss that is free agency. And then outside of that, Curtis Samuel, he's replaceable. He's a really fun receiver, but it's a deep receiver class. You have the picks. You have 2 second-round picks. You'll be able to get a Curtis Samuel replacement and feel pretty good about it to pair with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. Tyler Larson, losing him is whatever when you bring in Biadasz and Allegretti. You can stomach that. Cody Barton's kind of a tough loss, but he's replaceable. He's an average linebacker. He played a good role for Washington, though, so kind of take that how you will. And then Cam Curl, like I said, you replace him with Jeremy Chin. I get not wanting to pay him all that money he wanted. I actually don't know if he got all that much money with the Rams. That's something I forgot to look into. I haven't quite gotten to my Rams evaluation of their free agency yet. 2-year deal worth up to $13 million. I guess he didn't make all that much, but it is what it is. Jeremy Chin isn't that much of a drop-off, and he's a little more versatile, so. Plus, you've got young DBs. I'm excited to see how their secondary is going to shake out. But all that being said, this is a good offseason. I can't give it an A because I feel like there's a couple guys that I don't love how much money they're making. There's a couple guys that I feel like just don't fit what I'd want Washington to do. So I'm going to give them an A-. I think that's a pretty fair way to look at this. Didn't suffer any crippling losses. Didn't add anybody that's going to be an immediate superstar, but you added a lot of impact day one talent, some good depth, and some guys that can lay the groundwork for some young guys to come in and really take over. So Washington is putting themselves in a good position right now and for in the future. But anyways, folks, that's going to do it for this installment of my grading every team 1 week into free agency series. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like down below, as it does help out the channel a ton, shows your support, shows you care. I really appreciate it. And also make sure to subscribe, because if I haven't covered your team yet, you won't want to miss when I do. And if I have covered your team already, go ahead and subscribe anyways, because we've got more great NFL content coming your way all the way throughout the offseason, into the regular season, and beyond. We're going to be talking about the draft. We're going to be talking about all the teams again after the draft. I'm going to be talking about all the teams again throughout the summer, mixed in with some film breakdowns and whatnot. You definitely won't want to miss that. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about my grades for these teams. Was I a little too high on some players? Was I a little too low? Was I too harsh? Was I too kind? Anything in between? Please let me know down in the comments what you think. I'd love to sit and chat with you about what's going on around the league. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed. And to everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it, because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that